I think every person has some piece of media that has impacted their life in such a way that it changes them. Whether it be to completely redesign their room based on this newfound love, or even change their perspective on how they look at things. To me, there has been no other series that has managed to capture this feeling quite like One Piece. A 2-decade-plus-old manga created by Eiichiro Oda, which would go on to become the best-selling series in the medium, and, I believe that in its lifetime, will become the second best-selling comic series, right above Batman. And if the amount of figures I have of the series is anything to go by, I quite like One Piece, to say the least. But what has caused me to feel this way? Why would I give so much of a shit about a 1,000-plus chapter manga that I obsess over it and spend every waking hour thinking about it in some capacity? Today, I'm gonna talk about how One Piece changed my life. And just to clarify, this isn't meant to try and convince you to get into One Piece if you haven't seen it, but hey, it'd be really nice if I somehow managed to do that. So, to start, I'd like to talk about my previous history with getting into stuff. I'm usually not one that gets into things on their own. I just kind of get into them based on other people's recommendations, and I'm sure this is the case for a lot of people. It's rare that I will ever really get into something because I saw it and immediately gained interest. It pretty much always comes from a friend who has told me how great it is, or seeing all the talk about it on the internet. And this has led into some personal problems. It leads into a little something I like to call hyped intrigue, where I honestly get into a piece of media because so many people around me are telling me how great it is before I finally give in and watch or play whatever it is. And I feel like this has a lot of negative impacts on me. This is how I got into Danganronpa and My Hero Academia, where I liked what I watched, but my perception on viewing them has been sort of damaged, and it's hard for me to disassociate all that annoyance I've previously felt. With Danganronpa, I, as an Ace Attorney fan, was surrounded by fans of DR who were constantly singing its praises to the point where I was told it's like Ace Attorney, but better. And with My Hero Academia, where I was told it was one of the greatest anime ever. Even with a much more recent thing where I only just now started watching JoJo because I honestly just hated the fan base and wanted nothing to do with it for the longest time. Now, this is not to bash the fans of these series, or even the idea of expressing enjoyment of something you like. I'm just trying to put into perspective how much of a change this had over me with two series in particular. Ace Attorney, which if you've been subscribed to me for a long time, you know how much I enjoy that, and One Piece. Neither of these series were really ever talked about by people I knew before I got into them. Ace Attorney is a story for another day, but with One Piece, I had seen it on Toonami and caught sporadic episodes of the Water 7 saga, and was like, alright, that's cool, and proceeded to let that slip away. It wasn't until 2018 that I decided to pick it up for real. The year prior, I had actually gotten into watching anime on a much more regular basis, and decided that I wanted to watch a very long series. The longest I had watched up to that point was Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. So, January 5th, I started up One Piece, and I have never been the same since. To make a long story short, this is my current favorite thing in existence. How it got there is through 3 key moments in the story, and I'd like to go over them and how they helped in establishing that. Number 1, walk to Arlong Park. This was the moment that made me truly realize what I was in for. Luffy planting his straw hat on Nami's head, him, Zoro, Usopp, and Sanji all walking toward Arlong's Park with the phrase, "Let's go." The wonderful use of the track overtaken as the 4 pirates just march towards their destination without saying anything on the way, only telling the residents of Kokoyashi Village to step aside before Luffy punches a hole in the wall and simply asks, which one's Arlong? This made me really love One Piece, because I felt a total change in perspective. I began to see Luffy as much more than a reckless, happy-go-lucky guy that likes to have fun. I could feel his determination to want to help Nami, and I think is what propelled him to being my favorite character in the series. Prior to this, we had only really seen Luffy as this carefree guy, so seeing this tonal change in him, where it's really the first time we ever see him as serious, is a great moment. As we know, Luffy is willing to take a stand rather than just be goofy all the time. Number 2, Jet Gatling. This is without a doubt my favorite moment, not only from Enies Lobby, but One Piece in general. I know the usual highly regarded moment from this arc is the I want to live scene, and I do love that with all my heart, but Luffy's finishing blow on Lucci has always stuck with me. The long and destructive battle between the two all coming together with a final move that really put him beyond his limits, showing me how far Luffy was willing to go just to protect his friends. Note, I was watching the Funimation dub at the time, so I got Colleen Clinkenbeard, and I have to give immense praise to her for this scene. Pure screams of anger and agony coming from Luffy as he's pummeling his enemy right out of the building, and after finally finishing Lucci off and falling down, the announcement of his defeat was such an amazing feeling moment for me. It's what I can honestly pinpoint to what made Luffy rise from my favorite One Piece character to just my favorite character in anything. I came to admire him and reflect back on his actions, how I wish I could be more like him. I'd like to be able to do anything for those that I care about. I have some dreams of my own, but I'm honestly too scared to pursue them, and seeing how Luffy goes about things, while not exactly executing my dreams in the same way, I admire how he can just jump headlong into situations to accomplish his goals, and I wish I could be the same. Number 3, Sanji says what he really wants. Believe it or not, it wasn't until Whole Cake Island where One Piece actually became my favorite thing. It took a while, I know. My reasoning was because I had an honestly bad problem with media where I kind of looked at everything as incredibly objective and that I could only say something was my favorite if I didn't really find faults with it. My favorite at the time was FMA Brotherhood, which I didn't really see anything that I personally found much fault in. I was obsessed with personal perfection, and looking back, this is just incredibly silly and flawed because nothing is really perfect. But I still carry this mindset because I found some personal flaws with One Piece. Up until Sanji told Luffy that he wanted to go back to the Sunny after leaving his crew, despite knowing the danger that would pose to them. This is what made me realize, hey, things don't have to be perfect to be your favorite, and made me realize just how much I really loved this series. It also changed my outlook on media and how I view it. I've learned to be less critical of things, and honestly, being critical is something that just doesn't suit me. I've learned to look at things with more subjectivity than objectivity. Of course, I haven't thrown the latter away entirely, but I think I've learned to accept my biases more and just be okay with them. All of these are enough to make up for something that I like a lot, but one more factor comes into play that goes deeper and really gives me an eternal appreciation for One Piece and Oda. Just a content warning, I'll be talking about serious things such as depression and suicide. See, I'm someone that has a little thing called depression. Don't worry, it's not nearly as bad as it used to be. I have gone to therapy in the past and it helped me immensely. And where this comes into play is that at a point, I honestly didn't even know what I wanted to live for. I didn't have that many plans for the future, and I've even thought, what am I even living for on many occasions throughout my life, just considering ending it all. But then came One Piece. I didn't really expect to enjoy the series as much as I did, but somewhere along the way, I made a promise to myself that I would see the end of this series. I just want to say that when a series has done this to me and actively makes me want to be alive, it will forever hold a special place in my heart. I am forever grateful to the passion Oda has put into his magnum opus, and I want to see his journey through to the end. I want to be there with the Straw Hat Pirates when they reach Laugh Tale, when they discover the One Piece, and when Luffy becomes King of the Pirates.